Office of Student Life, and on behalf of the Student Affairs Human Relations Committee, the Minority Student Affairs Office, the YWCA, and the Committee on Lectures, it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. Our speaker, Dr. Robert Terry, Director of the Humphrey Institute's Education for Reflective Leadership program, was for several years president of a consulting firm advising organizations on civil rights, corporate social responsibility, and organizational development. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, and the public school systems of Cleveland, Baltimore, and Detroit have been his clients. Dr. Terry coined the phrase, white male club. Among his publications is a book entitled For Whites Only, and it has had a major national impact. His current research focuses on a theory of action and its implications for ethics and policy. He has a PhD and MA in social ethics and policy from the University of Chicago, and he holds a divinity degree from Colgate-Rochester Divinity School. And now to address the topic of racism, its new forms and new challenges, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Robert Terry.
Thank you. Had a delightful day here. I wasn't thinking about it being too delightful when I was getting up at 5 this morning, but since I've been here, it's been very nice. I hope that I can get home. How's the snow outside? Not snowing too much. No problem. What I'd like to do tonight is combine some comments with your participation. I'm not a great believer in just talking, but I figure we ought to all get into the show here and participate. So I'd like to start out with a very quick activity which sets the context for taking a look at racism, its new forms and new challenges, by asking, and this will be a duplication for a few of you who were in the seminar this afternoon, but since most of you were not, it will not be a duplication. What I'd like you to do is, in groups of 3, just sort of turn around or however, just in little groups of 3, describe a time when you think you were unfairly treated. And what I want you to do is think of a very particular incident. It won't be hard, it'll come back very clearly once you get into it. And describe that incident to 2 other people, and each of you do that fairly quickly, and then look for what's common in your stories. And I'm going to ask you for the commonalities, okay? So just take a few minutes, think of a time when you think you were really unfairly treated, describe that to each other, and look for what's common in the stories. Just take a few minutes and do that. Stories to each other? Okay, what's in common in your stories?
One of ours was you already have an idea of what you might, or just already have an identity.
Okay, so there's what a friend of mine calls the argument categories. It's already in place, prejudice or stereotype will come and get you locked in, okay?
One single person was the person affecting us.
So one person was doing it to all of you, okay? How were you feeling in those situations? Angry, powerless, frustrated. Any of you feel guilty that there must be something wrong with you? And if you go through that little process, that's always a good one. That's when we internalize oppression. We say, they're not doing it to us, I must be doing it to myself. How many of you knew that you were being unfairly treated exactly when it was happening to you? Yeah, about all of you, okay. How many of you thought the person or group doing it to you should have known better? How many of you, when you thought about it, it came back with great vivid feeling? Right, not too hard, right? Right there. My case was English teacher in high school. There are many cases, but this was one. In a letter writing course, I had finished the assignment and was sort of bored, so I wrote a love letter to one of the young women in the class, handed it in. What do you think the teacher did with the letter? Right, his name is Melvin Tesla, the son of a bitch. And I hope he's listening. It's all very vivid. I remember exactly where I was and exactly what happened, and that was very unfair. Very unfair. Okay, this time, what I'd like you to do is, in the same little group, describe a time when you were unfair to someone. And those of you who can't think of things, think of your brothers, sisters, parents. I'm sure you can come up with something. But think of a time when you were unfair to someone, describe the event, and then look for what's common in those stories. So just take a couple minutes to do that. Let's see what we have out of these stories. What do you have in common in these stories? What's common to these stories? Hard to think of, right? How many of you found it more difficult to get focused in contrast to the first one? Most of you? It's easier to focus on that first stuff, so you know you're being had right then, by God. What were some of the feelings that you had that were generated in your stories? Guilt? Regret? Embarrassment? How many of you knew that you were being unfair right when you were doing it? How many of you had to be told by the unfairee, the one who was having it? And then he told you, oh, How many of you felt good while you were doing it? Other than myself. Right. Let's be honest about it. Sometimes I can just whip ass. Sometimes it just feels good to, and then later you regret it. But at the time, it's kind of an emotional release, and you just go on with it. Okay, what I've done is I put you in a situation where you were both a down on the receiving end and an up. So what I'd like to do is tell you a parable about ups and downs. And there's going to be a lot of play on the word ups and downs, so go along with it. But I think it sets the context of what I want to talk about tonight. What makes an up and a down is that an up can do more to a down than a down can to an up. That's what keeps an up and a down down. Now the downs have to know a lot more about ups than ups have to know about downs. As a matter of fact, the only time ups worry about downs is when downs get uppity. At which time they're put down by the ups. Now, the ups tend to talk to each other and study the downs. And they're trying to figure out what's up. Or what's coming down, for that matter. Now, the downs take the ups out to lunch a lot to explain their downness. And they say, this is what it's like to be a down. And the ups go, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. You know, I talked to a down just the other day and they had a different story. You downs ought to get together. Now, after a while, the ups who want it smart enough begin to say, you know what we ought to do? We ought to have all the downs trot in front of the ups one at a time by group, you know, representing different down groups, and talk about their downness. You know what we're going to call that? Human relations training. We're going to institutionalize it in a state law and do it in Minnesota and Iowa. And all the downs come through. The ups, of course, never talk about their upness. That's why they're ups. It's only the downs talking about their downness. Now, after a while, the downs weary of explaining to the ups what it's like to be a down. They say, if I have to talk to one more up what it's like to be a down, I'm going to throw up. So what they do is they go off by themselves and they form a process which they call networking and support groups. This makes the ups nervous because 3 downs talking to each other is revolutionary, 3 ups it's a board meeting. Now, the ups, when they get nervous about what's going on, they find a down, because ups know that all downs know each other because they nod to each other a lot. Thank you very much. Because the ups notice that when ups nod to each other, nobody nods back. But the downs nod and say, do you know that? No. But anyway, so the ups know that downs are interchangeable. So what they do is they look around for a nice looking down, dress them up, and send them down to the downs to see what the downs are up to. We call this personnel, affirmative action, and student affairs. Because the ups don't want to go down, because the ups don't know how to deal with the downs, and so they send it down, dress them up, make them a quasi-up, but they're not really an up. They only look like an up, and they're supposed to act like an up, and they're supposed to report to the ups about what's coming down. Now, there's good news and there's bad news in all this. The good news is that we're all both ups and downs. There's nobody who's a perfect up. Matter of fact, if somebody were a perfect down, they wouldn't even be able to stand up, they'd be so oppressed. Now, I'm working on perfect upness. I'm working on rich. Not today, but I'm in a lot of the up categories. White, male, Protestant, right-handed, tall, professional. I'm going into a down category. I'm 47. Finally a protected group. Didn't think I'd make it. So the good news is we're all both ups and downs. The bad news is that when we're an up, it makes us stupid. What I call dumb upness. Now, why does that happen? It's not because we're less bright. It's because we don't have to pay attention to downs the way downs have to pay attention to us. It's in the nature of the relationship of ups and downs. The only time ups worry about downs is when the downs are doing something that bothers the ups, like Granada. And you notice how quickly we learn about Granada and how little you know about it now? Everything's peaceful. I was asked a question once, say two intelligent things about Indonesia. I first had to figure out where it was. Indonesians know a lot about the United States. The United States doesn't know diddly about Indonesia. Why is that? We don't need to. We're ups, they're downs. So if those of you who are international know that you have to know a lot more about us than we do about you. Where's Gabon? We have a student from Gabon. We know where it was. I had to find out. Didn't know anything about it, and I couldn't say one intelligible fact about that country. Well, that's just the nature of living in a world of ups and downs. So the good news is we're all both ups and downs. The bad news is that when we're ups, it makes us stupid. And the problem is that since ups talk to each other and are more comfortable with each other, they're not comfortable with downs. Where, for ups to kind of figure out what's coming down, who do they have to talk to? Downs. But they normally talk to themselves and ask for reports about what's coming down, or what's up. Okay? So, now, I put it in this context because I want to now give living proof of how this works. So I'm going to ask one of you a question, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind after I answer. Okay? Are you ready? There we go. What's it mean to be white? Nothing, right? There we have living proof of dumb upness. And that's not unusual. How many of those of us who are white spend any time walking down the street saying, I wonder what it means to be white? Anybody? We don't do that. Do we have somebody who does that?
I do.
Very good. Why are you doing that? Are you weird?
Because I'm not college educated.
Aha! Hey, little down category there. Notice how quickly we come out of our down categories? Most people will come out of, that's a wonderful example, most people come out of their down category because college is often perceived as up and non-college is down. Not necessarily true, but that's how it's often perceived in the society. How we come out of our down category to make sense out of our life. But what don't we think about? Our up categories. Now, I used to think if I was a down over here, when I became an up in another category, I'd carry over my insight from my downness to my upness. Smart down, dumb up. A couple of examples. I was working with Detroit Edison, electric power company in Detroit, and we were working with white and black men, happened to be the group I was working with, and I'd done this whole thing about ups and downs and what have you, and they were playing a game. It was called Watch the Honky Run. One down is worth 5 ups in a conversation on down turf. I'm sure most of you have experienced that. When you're coming out of your down, if you're a lot smarter than the ups, you run them all over the room. And so the blacks were running the white men all over the room. In the afternoon, a white woman came in to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace. Color went out the window. These men locked arms, and they said, this woman's got an attitude problem. This woman is out to get us. This woman is interested in making us feel bad and thinking that we're terrible sexual harassers. Color was not the issue. Gender went into the foreground and color went into the background. Now, just so that other groups don't get off the hook, we had also interviewed Eleanor Schmiel. Eleanor Schmiel is the past president of NOW. We said, what do you see as the agenda for women over the next 10 years? She went on for about a half hour, lucid prose. And then we said, what do you see as the agenda for whites? She said, what kind of question is that? That's a dumb question. She went dumb up. She skipped categories. Smart down, dumb up. See, we come out of our down category to make sense out of life. And we can be an up 1 minute and down the next. It's just like that. Boom, boom. And we tend to look at life primarily through down categories. I'm just a freshman. Down category. I can't do anything. I'm just a freshman. I'm just a middle manager. I'm new here. We have 100 ways in which we do that. And it's just very quick. Up, down, up, down. Okay, now, I wanted to put us in that kind of a context because I want to talk about racism and why we don't deal with the issue of racism very well, because we usually have a bunch of ups talking to each other and not paying attention to the downs. Now, how then can we get a handle on the question of racism if we're not going to be dumb ups? Or how can we get our situation so we can be side by side, so we get out of this craziness of up-down relations, because it's just insidious. A friend of mine used to call this person on the phone, and this person was very much into power relationships, and every time she'd call, he would escalate. So then she'd escalate, and he'd escalate. And then he found out that wasn't working, so then he'd drop down, and she'd drop down. He couldn't figure out how just to have a conversation. It was always a power of who's over whom. And we live in a society in which one of the organizing metaphors is up is happy, down is sad. Drop dead, depressed. I'm feeling down today. Computers are great when they're bad when they're not easy. I mean, they don't move. I'm going up to see my boss. Even if you go down the stairs, we're going to dress up. Did you dress down? Did you dress at all? We judge whether you've dressed up or dressed down on how powerful you are. If you wear a tie, you've got more going for you. You're plateaued. A lot of things happen. That whole dress for success thing is dressing up, dressing appropriately, and what have you. All kinds of craziness, but it's rooted in a metaphor that up is happy, down is sad. Nobody wants to be in a down position. And a lot of people want to be up. And the problem is, how do you ever get in an up-down world side by side? See, that's one of the challenges of dealing with the issue of racism. Because not only are we dealing with power issues, we're also dealing with a cultural envelope that says everybody wants to be an up. And you can't have ups without downs. Doesn't mean anything. And yet we keep talking about egalitarian and so on. How many of you have caught any of the Bobby Kennedy story on TV? I have no idea whether that's true. Do you? You have any sense that that's accurate? Thinks it sound? I don't know. I mean, given docudramas, you don't know when the drama starts and the docu ends. But anyway, it took me back to the 60s and the 70s and so on, and some of my own history, and I was really struck about the craziness in this society of how deep it's rooted to be an up or a down, and how hard it is to break out of that fundamental metaphor. Yet it seems to me that's one of the challenges of dealing with racism, is to get out of crazy up-downness. We're going to have a lot of up-down relationships, but we shouldn't have them locked in by arbitrary characteristics, like color, like gender, like sexual orientation, whatever it is. That's craziness. It can be locked in terms of, say, position in an organization. But that's mobile. One doesn't have to get locked into that. But when you lock it into arbitrary characteristics, we have a serious problem. Okay, now, given that up-down kind of a situation, what I'd like to do is share a model with you to try to get a handle on what in the world is racism and what are the new forms of racism and how are we dealing with racism today. By the way, this is a very unusual topic to be talking about in 1985 at a university. I think we're probably the only university doing it in the country. So the very fact that you're doing this is unusual. It's just not happening. I mean, I used to do racism seminars 3 and 4 times a week. The last one I did was 8 months ago. So it's not what you call a hot item that people can hardly wait to hear about. So I congratulate you for dealing with it. Okay. So I call the diamond model. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but I want to take a look at different ways to look at racism and how we try to make sense out of what's happening to us, and how do we judge whether we're making any headway on the issue of racism, and where do we need to put our energy to try to understand it, and what are the implications for a university. When I look at an organization, I look at 4 different dimensions: mission and meaning. This is where we're going, and this is the significance of where we're going. Now, one of the things I've learned about mission and meaning is that it's not in everybody's self-interest to tell you what's important to them and where they're going. That's what we call a staff meeting. Like, why did Alan say such and so? Beats the hell out of me. I have no idea. I mean, what the hell's going on with Alan? Something crazy. That's a hidden agenda, right? Where you say one thing and do another. People will tell you one thing and do another. Now, why don't people tell you what their mission is? Well, for a variety of reasons. Number 1, they may not know for sure. Number 2, they may know, and they know damn well it's shaky. Number 3, they know, but if they tell you, you'll hold them to it. So you keep it to yourself and keep all your options open. Right? I think that's a biggie. Because if you tell somebody what you're about, they'll say, you're not delivering on what you said you were about, so don't tell. Okay. Yet what we know about organizations is that organizations are most effective where the mission is clearly understood, clearly defined, believed in, and trusted as real. And organizations are in great disrepute and great mess if the mission is vague, unclear, not believed in, and not thought to be real. Organizations are in terrible shape on that. And so, mission is crucial. Power. In the United States, I think, and probably in other countries too, but particularly in the United States, we live in a love-hate relationship with power. We're absolutely intrigued with it and repelled by it at the same time. That's why we like Dallas. What's the appeal of Dallas? JR messing over folks, being hurt, and then coming back to do it again. I mean, we want JR maimed, not killed. We want some extremity clipped, a finger or toe or something. But we don't want him wiped out, because then he couldn't come back next week and mess over somebody else. Isn't that right? I mean, isn't that the intrigue of Dallas or Falcon Crest or Behringer's? Is that the new one? I haven't even seen it yet, but same themes. The abuses of power. Yet, we're repelled by concentrations of power. If I asked you, how many of you thought you were leaders? I'd venture a guess that even in your heart of hearts you thought you were, you wouldn't tell me. Why? Because leaders have power. And nobody wants to admit they have any. It's always somebody else. Not all powerful people are leaders, but I think all leaders are powerful. Else they don't make things happen. And so we're ambivalent about power. The founders of who wrote the Constitution were very much concerned about concentrations of power, so they divided into 3 branches of government, and that's why in the United States you can't blame anyone for anything, it's always somebody else. That's called separation of powers. In the Federalist paper, it got all rationalized. Don't let power get in the hands of a few, because somebody's going to mess with somebody if power is concentrated. So spread it around. And yet we keep worrying and get interested in all these programs where it all gets concentrated. I mean, we're drawn to it and repelled by it. In this model, power is wonderful. There is no life without power, and nobody is powerless. That's why I always get a kick about the radicals who want to organize the powerless. My suggestion is that they meet at a cemetery. You can't organize powerless people. It just can't be done. They're dead. That's what the meaning of powerless. Somebody's powerless, they're already wiped out. So everybody's got some power, even under the most oppressive conditions of the Holocaust or slavery. There's a wonderful book called Slavery from Sundown to Sunup, talking about what's going on at night when the man isn't there or not integrated. And what were the slaves doing? Organizing. moving around, making things happen. Even under the most difficult of circumstances, there was still possibilities. So you had the Underground Railroad, you had the hymns, the communication processes, all kinds of things were going on, even under the most gross kind of oppression. In the Holocaust, there's stories of people still trying to carve out some little arena where they had some self-determination. Okay, so power. So mission is our direction term, our toward which. Power is our energy term, or by which action occurs. Then there's structure. Somebody give me an example of a structure. Standing in line to register. That's a good one. You all know about that, right? Rules, regulations, procedures, and so on. So that structure is our form and process, and it's our through which action moves. We spent a lot of time dealing with structure, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it here, but I think we know what all that is since we deal with it every day at a university. Resources. This is our material term, and it's our from which. Okay, now, what I mean by material is anything that you can have more of, less of, or move it around, and somebody wants it. So ideas, our resources, tables, chairs, time, space. You can have more of it, less of it, move it around. And somebody wants it. Very quickly, let's play a little game. Let's build a house together. What's one thing, in purple here, what's one thing you need to build a house?
Bricks.
Bricks. That's creative. What corner of the diamond would you put bricks? Resources, right? Okay, quick. Okay, what else do you need? We got bricks. Money. What corner would you put money? All corners. Resources. Do I have any takers for power for money? Any takers for that order on power corner? You're wrong. Isn't it great in a time of rapid change to be wrong on a few things and know that you're absolutely wrong? Why do I put it on resources and not power? Let's suppose I have $1 million sitting in the bank collecting 5% interest. Am I powerful? Stupid. What makes me powerful? Take that money and start moving it around. If it's just sitting there, I'm rich, but I'm not powerful. I become powerful when I take it and move it. If we don't distinguish power from resources, we can never figure out how little groups can change big groups. Who won the war in Vietnam? Or who didn't? I mean, who didn't win? We didn't win. Who had more resources? We did. So resources can't be a direct relationship to power. You got to look someplace else on the diamond to figure out why we didn't win in Vietnam. Because we could have obliterated the North Vietnamese with atomic weapons. Well, we had the resources to do it. So the question is not the amount of resources, it's the use of the resources. Little groups can raise havoc with big groups. 3 parents, highly organized, can raise havoc with a public school. Absolute havoc. Because they target all of their resources with a clear mission, and they want to accomplish one thing. The school has a lot of agendas, and only sort of gives them a little flip. Nader changed General Motors with his book Unsafe at Any Speed. By the time GM was had, they started studying Nader's sex life, which I understand was a boring inquiry. Okay, so I want to distinguish power from resources. Power is the actual expenditure of energy. Resources is the stuff that you can mobilize to make something happen. So let's suppose we got this stuff to build it with bricks and nails and boards and what have you, and we've got some money. What else do we need? Labor. What corner would that be? Well, it depends on what they're doing. If the labor's taking a break, when they're actually building their power. But when they're taking a break, until you walk on the scene, they're a resource. But when they're actually expending energy to make the house happen, then it's power. Okay, what else do we need? Blueprint. What corner would you put blueprint? Structure. That's the form that it's going to take in order to build a house. So building a house is the mission: rental property, lean-to, summer cottage, whatever it is, rental property, something. So that's the mission. Then power. Okay, let me throw some words at you, and you tell me which corner of the diamond they go at. Budget. Structure, very good. It's not the resources, they're all funny numbers. Any of you have built budgets and other funny numbers, and we move them around like they're facts. We make them up as they go and say, well, why not? Okay, law. Courage, yeah, structure. Courage. Power. Commitment. Power. Will, human will. A will, legal document. Structure. Brainstorming as a process. Give you a clue there. Structure. Has form to it, form and process. What's the mission of brainstorming? Come up with, increase your resources of ideas, right? The mission of brainstorming is to have more ideas than you had before you started it. Okay. Now the reason I suggest this is, I think this is a helpful way to give you a framework, or it does for me, it gives me a framework to take a look at the issue of racism. Now, what I'd like you to do now is, in your head, define racism for yourself. Just take a minute and say, okay, now what's racism? Okay, just do that for a minute. This is for the introverts. Okay? Okay, now give me the images that you have about racism. Just, racism is what? Anyone. We'll build on each other's here. Prejudice, okay? Judging people on the basis of the color of their skin. Okay? So it's color consciousness would be racism. There it's prejudice, making a prejudgment on insufficient information. Okay, what else?
Power.
I'm sorry.
Difference in power.
Differential in power. Okay, difference in power. And what's happening in that difference that makes it racist? Is it just the difference? Keeping somebody down? There's some oppression connected with it. Okay? What else?
Structure of domination and submission.
Structure. You're doing all right for not being in college. You're in as a graduate. Okay, the structure of domination and suppression or exclusion. Okay. Anything else? I'm sorry. Ignorance of each other, other groups. Okay. All right. Now, the way we frame the problem determines the solution. Let's suppose we say the problem is ignorance. What's the solution? Education. Let's suppose we say the problem is differential in power when one group's dominating another. What's the solution? Of power. That's our shared power. Let's suppose we say the problem is prejudice. The solution is making a prejudgment on insufficient information. What's the solution? Better information. So that we don't have the hardening of the categories. Let's suppose we say the problem is discrimination or excluding one group based on color. What's the solution? Inclusion. You keep people out, let them in. Right? I mean, if the problem is keeping people out based on arbitrary criteria, then the solution is bring them in. Okay, now, which corner of the diamond do you think most ties to exclusion and systematically excluding people from society? What corner would that most likely be connected to? Structure. It's connected with power because there's enforcement to it, but you've got a process of keeping people out. Rules, regulations, procedures, redlining, zoning, all kinds of things, okay? How about what corner would you put oppression? How? What corner would you put prejudice? Resources, insufficient information. Information is a resource. What goes at the mission corner? What? I'm sorry, desire to change or an non-desire? If you're doing racism, what would be a lack of desire to change? Okay? It may also be a power, although the desire to change may be a mission thing. I think what goes there is ethnocentrism. A cultural mindset that just sees things from one point of view and says that's normal. And that's the only way to look at it. Now, what I just did there was to show that depending upon which corner of the diamond you came at life, that's how you would define the problem. What I'd like to do now is take those different notions and put them in a little larger context to show how in the United States we're framing the problem of racism so we can see whether we're making headway or not on dealing with it. And I'd like to suggest 4 different ways of framing the problem. There are probably 6 or more, but I'll give 4. The first one is the free market model. This is Ronald Reagan, Buckley, Milton Friedman. How many of you have heard of Milton Friedman? Most of you heard. Okay, the free market model basically goes like this. Look, we're all individuals. And we all have as a value for ourselves our own individual freedom. And the best way to be free is in a competitive marketplace where we all can compete with each other so that the invisible hand can take all of these competitive exchanges, because if you have something that I want, I'll buy it from you and you can make it for me. Wonderful. And say, what we need to do is maximize individual freedom and efficiency. And what's the great threat to this model? Monopolies, right? Where OPEC, bad news, OPEC. And we're so glad from this model to see it breaking up, because we know that cartels cannot be stable because somebody's going to want to break rank, like Nigeria. Not because Nigeria is better or worse, just trying to maximize its profits. So that cartels are inherently unstable. Okay, so here we have this model of all these individuals competing in the marketplace. And now what's then racism in this model? What would it be? What's the mission? Individual freedom and efficiency, right? What gets in the way of that? What are the 2 things that are going to get in the way of that? What's going to get in the way of making free exchanges in the marketplace? Fraud. What? Well, right, there's nothing to exchange. That's good. And fraud, somebody doesn't have accurate information. And discrimination that keeps you out of the marketplace. So, how do the free marketers define racism? Prejudice and discrimination. How does Reagan define racism? Prejudice and discrimination. What does Reagan say he's not? A racist. When he says he's not that, what does he say? I'm not prejudiced, and we do not stand for discrimination in this administration. That's the basic argument. You will hear that clearly over and over again. It fits the model. Because basically a Reagan or a Friedman or the kind of free marketers look at life at all these exchanges. What's the common good? The sum of all the exchanges. That's the great thing about the free market. You don't have to worry about the common good. It happens all by itself. As long as you don't have fraud, monopolies, everybody's maximizing their own benefit. So if I have something you want to buy, sell, we'll work out a deal. Everybody's doing that. We don't have to have anybody worrying about the common good. It happens all by itself. Wonderful. And racism gets in the way of that because it restricts access to the marketplace and it undermines through fraud and lying, because if we have prejudice, we can't make honest judgments about each other. Okay? It's also Gerald Ford. Same here. Not Betty. Gerald. Okay. You all know that model, right? So, racism is defined as prejudice and discrimination. Why is it a problem? It interferes with the marketplace. Keeps people out. So conservatives at their best should be libertarians. They should be the great advocates of civil rights. Right? Individual freedom. They should have been in the lead on individual choice. They should have been in the lead for non-discrimination. Why weren't they? They were too busy being supremacists. Saying it's more important to protect our vested interests than to open the system for everybody. This group should be the great advocates of the Equal Rights Amendment. What's the Equal Rights Amendment say? No discrimination based on gender. No monopolies. That's all it says. It's a conservative amendment. And what are the conservatives doing? Trying to get a bastion of male supremacy. But they shouldn't do it on their own terms. The best way to deal with a conservative is help them be themselves. Because at their best, they're for individual freedom. For everybody. They can't say just for some folks and be consistent. So take them on. I think one of the great challenges today is to help conservatives into the 20th century. And by the 20th century means on their own terms that they practice what they preach. That is, they can make tremendous contributions to the fight against racism if they would just practice what they preach. Namely, everybody has a place in the marketplace, and let's not have any arbitrary barriers that keep people out. So I hope that next time in all of your economics courses, you go back and you suggest to your professors that they're all anti-racist and also feminists. Okay, so that's one model. It's a very dominant one, and I'd say it's the dominant one that's on the scene today. And it's the one that we have to deal with. Now, there's another group that says, and by the way, that's work in the resource corner. So here we have free market. Distribution of resources through the efficient allocation in the system, through a market mechanism. Free market folks here. Then you get the folks up here on the structure corner, and they say, you free marketers just don't understand. That's not the way life is. You think that life is like a machine, and through cost-benefit analysis and tinkering with the economic system, you can fix it and sort of dink it along with a little more money supply and a little more of this, a little more of that, and you can really understand the way the machine works. And all you economists out there are just tinkering with the machine. Life is not a machine. Life is a body. We've got to shift the metaphors from a machine metaphor to a body metaphor, in which all the parts have to function together so that the whole body can be healthy. This is Mondale. Humphrey. Bless you. I always have to do that one speech. Otherwise I get fired. Life is a body in which everybody can grow. And Humphrey said, growing up in Minnesota, we could also say the same thing in Iowa, is like planting corn. You put it in good soil, with good fertilizer, and sun, and rain, and up grows healthy corn. He said, people are like that. You put them in good homes, in good schools, in good communities, and up grow healthy people. Wonderful. So what are the key values? Not individual freedom in an efficient marketplace, personal growth in a flexible community that provides nurturing and support. Very different image. Well, then what's racism? A social disease that eliminates and that infects the body. Now, sounds all good. Where do they put the disease? Who has the disease? The whites? We're the healthy folks. It must be you. You probably don't have it. Raised in a ghetto. Terrible environment. That's awful. I don't know how you get it. I think it's a miracle that you're here, and we're really excited that you're here. When you get right down to it, it's really an uphill battle. I understand how tough it is, and we'll work real hard to get you here and keep you here, and you don't fail that way, because it's a race back. But be honest, no problem. We're really glad you're here, and we're going to fix it so you can stay here. And even if it means a double standard, that's okay to keep you here. Okay, now, what's going on? What's going on in this process? What this model does is focus on sickness and health, and then focuses on the sickness where? In the minority communities. And says, what we need to do is fix them, because we're okay. They're not okay. Let's make them okay the way we're okay. Mainstream. Without ever thinking that the mainstream might be polluted. That's Mondale. That's why you understand racism, and that's why he's a racist. Reagan, he at least tells you he's sort of crazy, but Mondale said he was different. It's easier to deal with Reagan. He just sort of tells you straight out. Mondale says that he's a lot more. And he really understands these issues, when in fact, I think he's operating out of this mindset, and that's why it's so hard to deal with, and that's why many blacks in particular gave up on Mondale, because he said he's not authentic. He says one thing and does another. That's why Shirley Chisholm started organizing the black women, because the Ferraro move was much more a move for whites than it was the Rainbow Coalition. What was going on there? Many white women said, rah, rah, coming out of the down category. They forgot there was an up category called whiteness. Didn't think about the whiteness, just came out of downness, identified the downness, and here double downs over here. Black women saying, don't forget us. And mine goes, who? Not, didn't call one black woman to his home to check on vice president possibility. Not one. Didn't have any black women as significant advisors. No wonder they got organized. It's racist. Exclusion. Okay, so we've got the free market model that says marketplace, Racism is described as prejudice and discrimination. Then we've got the body metaphor that says, it's sickness and health, and the healthy people have to help the sick people. The flip side of that is who's really sick is the white society that creates these problems to begin with. But that never gets examined because they're ups. So the ups want to fix the downs and make them like the ups. We can all be sick together. So we're now at this corner. Basically, the debate about racism in the United States is between these two corners. That's where the basic debate is, between the liberals and the conservatives. I'm suggesting that's a misplaced debate, and the reason we don't get on with it is because that's where the debate rests. Everybody come on in a non-discriminatory mode, or we're going to fix you. And come on in. Either way, it's a misplaced debate, and I want to suggest that the debate that's more productive for the future is around power and mission. The power folks have a different view. They say, all you body metaphor types who think that life is a body, you don't understand. Life is not a body where all the parts have to work together. I mean, I know all you systems analysts who love computers and input and throughput and output, just love that systems model. You love to work all that interdependency. And I know you love Cousteau swimming around saying, watch out for the whales, because if you mess with the whales, you mess with the fish, and finally you mess with the land. I know you all love that, but that's not the way life is. Life isn't a big system with all these parts. Life is a conflict of forces. Mao said, power comes out of the barrel of a gun. Nobody gives away power. You gotta take it. I got a Christmas card from a Marxist, which is no mean feat in itself. And, I opened up and said, Merry Christmas, and then I opened up and said, organize, organize, organize. Wonderful. Because the up-down model that we started with is basically this view of life. Life is a series of ups and downs. And what we need to do is help the downs organize to overthrow the ups, or to challenge the ups, because the ups are not going to give away power without the downs challenging. So